What if Black Canary led a rock band with 11 on guitar? Today on Panelism, it's Black Canary kicking and screaming. Welcome to Panelism, a podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf, and sometimes the digital versions of those worth having on your iPad for a short time. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask.
And this is the second episode in a row where one of us has chosen a book, read it digitally on Comixology, and thought, oh, that was fun, but, you know, I don't need to own it.
And let's preface that a little bit. No disrespect to the creators.
No,
a lot of hard work is put into these books, and we appreciate that like crazy. Just not our particular cup of tea. At the end of the day, it's more like, oh, glad I read it. Don't need to read it again.
Well, and if anything, I think it's an endorsement of the Comixology, what do we want to call this, business model or whatever, or just the
Todd
model.
Owns stock in Comixology, of course.
Yeah.
Sits on the board. I think it's a great business model, and I believe every Panelism listener should be.
Well, we have had a history. I think that is, we were never conscious about it until recently, but we do have a history of throughout this entire podcast, like 112 episodes or whatever, where I think if you go way back, we're still on the fence about digital comics and guided view. Yeah. And because I remember at the time, my friend Patrick would often comment on social media about things we said about guided view, and he was sort of in favor of it for certain books, and we've come around to that. So it's definitely an evolution in my thinking. To get to this point where I'm a happy, content Comixology Unlimited user. But yeah, with the book we're talking about, with no further ado, although you heard it in the intro, is Black Canary Kicking and Screaming. This was released in 2016. It is on DC Comics, of course. It was written by Brendan Fletcher, and the art is by Annie Wu and Pia Guerra. Annie does the first issue or two. Pia takes over for a couple of issues, and then Annie comes back and finishes out this arc.
Would we know Annie and Pia from other works?
That's a great question, Taylor. I believe Annie was on Hawkeye. That's what I think they call out. And I don't know where we would have seen Pia, but I know I've seen that name before, and I know I read something about it when I was researching the history of this book. Let me read you that back cover. Black Canary, by the way, the DC hero. If you're not aware, her real name is Dinah Lance. So I just knew the back cover starts with that name, and if you didn't know who that was, it would be weird. Dinah Lance hits the road after years as a soldier and vigilante. The last place Dinah saw herself is on stage. ... But she's quickly learning she died to protect the gang of misfits she's fallen into, and she just might have to. For some reason, the newly christened band Black Canary seems to be a magnet for trouble. ... And Dinah's not going to believe it when she finds out the reason why! ! From the pages of Batgirl, martial arts, super spies, and rock and roll combine here in the superheroines solo series Black Canary Volume 1.
Now, I know it's the way you sort of read it, but my God, that sounds like the best intro to a 90s movie where like the record screech happens and it's like, but what she doesn't know is that she's a carrot. It's that.
You were dead on.
Does that suggest a more sort of, a 90s rom-com sort of tone or, sort of a cheesy kind of thing? Or is that just how that intro was written?
Imagine the, what was her name? Darn. Anyway, all I can come up with is Tara Reid, the hugely successful Tara Reid vehicle, Josie and the Pussycats.
That's right.
Who is the Rachel person who's Josie? Anyway, that movie, but it's led by a superhero. That's kind of the tone we get here.
That movie was pretty fun though too. I
must admit, extremely fun. Yeah,
seeing Parker Posey and Alan Cumming ham it up was.
Oh my God, Seth Green in a boy band.
Yeah,
amazing. And then that other guy from Clueless in another boy band.
Breckenmeyer.
Yeah. Or they're in the same. They're in the same boy band.
Both of them went on to create Robot Chicken.
Yeah, you got me reminiscing about that movie, or I got me reminiscing. Anyway, that's sort of where we're at with this. Right. You're definitely in better shape if you take it with that tone in mind, I think. Okay. But it never leans too heavily into the self-aware sort of parody of it. It's not. It doesn't go corny like that. And it becomes a pretty big superhero book, sort of imagine Josie and the Pussycats and Scott Pilgrim the movie kind of crammed together.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Perfect. So as the back cover stated, Dinah, or Dee Dee as they call her now, because she has reverted to her maiden name, Drake, I believe. So it's Dinah Drake. So Dee Dee has become the lead singer of this band. Of course, she's Black Canary. She has this powerful voice that can be weaponized. And she's also a trained martial artist. The first issue was like really fun, and the art by Annie Wu is awesome. Like I think Pia Guerra's art is very cool also, but it's Annie Wu's book. You just feel it. Like it's like when Pia comes in, there must have been a sort of timing conflict or something, and she keeps it up. And I mean, and honestly, her art is wonderful. But then when Annie comes back for issue 4 or 5 or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, this is where we're supposed to be. Cause hers is a little like sketchier style. It's not as superhero-y, and it doesn't like attempt at all to be 3-dimensional. It's very flat. And
Invincible had that happen once or twice where some guest artists would come in and you're like, oh, this isn't quite the same. Like
right. It's So, and I think I mean, I'll just have to jump into it. There's no, I'm not spoiling it, but
quick great. For those of us who are casual observers of this part of the DC universe, has she recently been as a character, or is she still married to Ollie / Green Arrow? Because I thought they were a couple, or they've been a couple more often than not, or have been married more often than not. Does that ring any bell?
What happened? This is Black Canary that debuted after the Rebirth thing.
Okay.
So that might have all gotten retconned and erased. But you lead into an interesting point, which is like, even in this story, there are a lot of allusions to her, her former life, a soldier, a vigilante kind of life. But because of the context of her fronting a rock band touring around in a van, you would want to think that she's only in her early to mid 20s, but it's sort of like she's already been divorced and she's been a soldier and she's fought with Wonder Woman. And, it's sort of like, oh my gosh, like what? I don't know. That was a major problem with Rebirth, was trying to cram all that in to backstories of stuff. This is in the same universe as, I mean, obviously they're all in the same universe, but this is literally like Brendan Fletcher wrote the Batgirl Rebirth. Maybe he didn't come on with issue number 1 of the Rebirth, but he came in when Babs Tarr came on and it became Batgirl of Burnside, and it was a more hipster, and that too was a little, I mean, I loved those books, but it was very confusing in that here's Barbara Gordon, who's seemingly out of college, somehow has like a hugely successful, computer job or something, but also was paralyzed by the Joker and had a whole life. And you're like, what the hell? Like when they retconned this, it was so clumsy, I think.
Yeah.
They made them way too young.
Yeah.
So it has that same kind of fun feel of like, this is a fresh take on Black Canary. But I think where it suffers is that is really in that mashup of Scott Pilgrim and Josie and the Pussycats, because this is not like, when I started reading it, my take was, oh, cool. Like this is the punk version. That's not even a good take, but this is DC's version of Dazzler,
Oh, God.
And I thought, this is going to be fun. But several times through the book, Dinah says like, music's never really been my thing. And she's saying it to establish, like, there's this whole backstory between how the band is basically put together by a record label and had a different singer that the record label removed and put her in instead. But just her saying that pulls your, you stop being as invested in the band. You're like, well, what do you care then?
Do
like,
they use the band for does the band serve an important story reason?
Extremely.
Okay.
But it doesn't start out that way, and I think it is.
Did they just get bored writing the band at some point? Like, was that?
No. They're definitely in it. Like, they are integral. But the first issue, of course, is just sort of like they're on the road and crazy things happen at their shows, and Dinah always has to save the day. But then this do they
know about her past as bandmates?
Well, there are all these allusions to, you never talk about your past, or we still don't know what's up with you, and but it's clear that, like, she's the Black Canary. Like, I don't understand.
But so when she saves the day or she puts her costume on, they're like, oh, it's Dinah. Like, it's not like, who's that mysterious woman? And then Dinah's like, what just happened, guys? Like, is it she, well,
in the rock band, gets to dress like Black Canary, basically. Okay. So she's always in the, like, fishnet, boots, leather jacket.
Now, but is she the Black Canary, or they're like, hey, Dinah, you look like that superhero, the Black Canary?
No, that never comes up.
Okay.
And it's so obvious. I mean, at one point they mentioned that the only thing I was allowed to change about this band was its name. Well, she named it Black Canary. Like, what? Anyway, it's definitely like a wormhole of, like, where did this come from? Because I was doing the same thing of checking, like, my own history of the character, and, like, has this been brought up before, or did they really just think, hey, let's make her the singer of a rock band? So my history of the book is I saw it come out, when it was being published, and I don't think I ever even picked up a single issue, just figuring I'll grab the paperback when it's out. Yeah. I loved the art that I saw, and then it just kind of fell off my radar. I think the creative team switched, or maybe the book got canceled entirely. I know they made 2 volumes, but I don't know where it went after that. And this was a Comixology pick. Like, it was unlimited, and I downloaded it and thought, perfect. And you and I just talked about a book, Thanos Wins, that sort of had the same, discovery on your part. Like, you just found that on Comixology and thought you'd give it a spin.
Well, I'd seen talk about it again as it was.
Oh, that's published. True. You were actually, we each had a history with the book we chose. Yeah, these weren't random.
Yeah, and it was the same kind of thing. I was like, oh, one day, I'll probably get to this when it's complete, because you don't want to some of these series, they just don't work being released over the course of a week. And I understand the economics of it, but at the same time, there are some books that should have never been single issues. They should have just always been a trade paperback.
I wouldn't.
The way they're executed just works better.
I wouldn't put this in that category, but if I had been picking up the single issues, I think my interest really would have fallen off when the art changed. Again, not that it's inferior, it's just different. And it's sort of like it wasn't, they didn't switch artists for a story reason, or even, it seems like, for an employment reason, because when Annie comes back, it's like, oh, well, yeah, she just probably wasn't available for the publication schedule. Yeah. So,
common tale.
Yeah, I think it's weird. I guess I started out saying that, like, I think it's to its detriment that this is Black Canary, because myself, as an older reader, I was doing the game that you and I have just been participating in, which is, like, checking my own history on the character and wondering, like, wait, because they mention her maiden name, is Lance, because you were married to Kurt Lance, who shows up in the book, and you're like, Kurt Lance? I thought you were married to Oliver Queen. Like, what's, like, I don't even know. Yeah. And it becomes a sci-fi governmental conspiracy theory, which I think in a post Stranger Things world and in an Image Comics world, that would have worked so much better, as an independent character or something. And I feel like they really could have fleshed it out and given the character more of her own stuff, where the character doesn't have to say music's not really my thing, because there's this weird, it is made integral to the plot. It of course, like, draws the plot along this story point that you learn where their former singer was kicked out.
Maybe somebody at DC was like, they gave half the pitch, like, hey, we want a new Black Canary book. She's got to be in a band. We don't care what else happens. Like, maybe Jim Lee just handed that down because, like,
well, I can also see Brendan. I didn't follow it too closely at the time. I was really only reading Batgirl, but I do think that he had a pretty big hand in shaping the Gotham world. I think he was also writing Gotham Academy at the time. So I think whether he was brought in originally to do this or it was his original pitch was, let me take some of these characters and make them like younger and hipper, and I get it, but it definitely comes off as an Elseworlds what if kind of tale. Yeah. And honestly, it's just that line that comes up a few times when you hear the main character say, yeah, I'm not really into music. You're like, well, why are we following you around in a band? Like, I don't get it.
Can I ask a fairly controversial? Well, this may take us way off track, but we'll see how far we get. Moving forward, like, let's say they picked a day. And they're like, hey, guys, in 2020, both Marvel and DC will have reached the natural sort of endpoints of a lot of their current arcs. And after that day, we're never doing any shared continuity ever again. It'll just be Elseworlds and what if books from forever. Like, we've done all the continuity we'll ever need. Now it'll just be complete, separate universes for every single book, every single character. Like, wouldn't that be, would you love that or hate that if that was a real thing?
I don't know that it would even have to be that big a deal. I think it would be great if they could almost, like when there's a big world event book and all of them have like their own little banner on it, like just put a banner on it that's not Elseworlds, but it's, not canon or something. Just anything to tell us like this is a standalone story, because we've talked about that on many past episodes as well. The writer from Chew had this, great rant on Twitter one time about that. Now he would love to see a, Captain America riding on a dinosaur, but Marvel won't do it because they're so freaking concerned about keeping everything in continuity.
Yeah.
And then, the book you talked about last time, Thanos Wins, it's almost like that would make more sense out of continuity. Like just get, just tell these crazy stories about giant world-ending people in a different context, rather than trying to match it all back up with time travel and shit like that. Because even though time travel is not a focus of Black Canary, the inclusion of her former husband, Kurt, it's like, something's up with maybe not time travel, but like, how did he get resurrected or whatever? Because apparently he was dead, and so there's, there's a bit of confusion there. And, I don't know. Anytime that it's time travel is messy, I guess that's the shortest way to say it. If your whole book's not about your new concept of time travel, then oh boy, it's going to be a weird, plot step.
I'm still loving this idea. Like, just imagine a world where every book was Elseworld. So like, let's say DC still said, if you're going to write a Batman book, you have to have these characters. You can't like say you invent some totally new ridiculous thing that's like, Papa Smurf comes in. Like, you can't necessarily do that. But anything goes.
Please no.
Anything goes with these. I don't know why I picked such a weird thing. Anything goes with these things. You could essentially get. In the same year, you could even get the White Knight and Killing Joke and and
the
Hush at the same time.
This is the thing I don't understand is we're already getting that. It's just that and DC less than Marvel, but there's definitely like a ham-fisted, attempt to keep things in continuity. Because we did get Dark Knight's Metal and White Knight in the same year.
True.
And it's like, these books are totally different. Why would we even assume they happen in the same universe? What a goofy thing. But to its credit, like Black Canary feels like that. Like I've talked about other mainstream books before. Wasp is the one that comes to mind, where the Unstoppable Wasp, where like in the middle of it, there had to be a Civil War II tie-in, which totally screwed up the whole story. And this book, at least, it does feel like, a what if book in that sense of, though she mentions Wonder Woman and you're aware of some of her connections, it's not a part of anything. Like it's not like Wonder Woman never makes an appearance or something.
So
it might as well be that you took Black Canary and dropped on another planet and, this is her experience. But that said, I mean, like I said, that there's that one sticking point about music. And to me, I kept making the reference in my head to Dazzler, because Dazzler's whole deal is that she freaking loves music and like that's the sound, absorbing the sound is what allows her to release her light powers. Yeah. And so the more she plays and experiences music in her band, like the more spectacular her powers become. And there's such a reflection of like joy in that. Whereas this was, Dinah literally telling you like, hey, this is just my nighttime job.
I have to bristle against your Dazzler reference a little bit, only because my knowledge of Dazzler extends to the aborted appearance of Taylor Swift as Dazzler in X-Men Apocalypse. So I don't want to. I mean, that's my framework. So every time I hear that name, I'm like, ugh, I shudder just a little bit, going, ugh, I didn't want that. Thank God they didn't include it.
Yeah, a quick plug, A-Force from probably 2015 or 2016, a couple volumes of that are now available on Comixology Unlimited. And I had started reading it, and it was another book that I just had to drop at the time because I was reading too many. But I loved Dazzler in that. So I've borrowed them already on Comixology. I'm looking forward to jumping back into them. One other thing I wanted to say about the Comixology thing is you and I always talk about that guided view and, what's better picking this up. And that was another sticking point for me, was that I read this digitally and I don't think they did a good job with the guided view.
Oh,
and I've previously had that experience with the Batgirl books, especially the Batgirl Volume 1, which is like Batgirl of Burnside. And at the time I couldn't really put my finger on it. I was just not into guided view, I think, because I had been using like a free app where I could pinch and zoom a lot. Anyway, on this, there are several pages where they do like a set of tons of tiny panels. And when you're tapping through, and especially on an iPad, like on a bigger screen, like I was, these tiny panels are expanded to fill the whole thing. And it takes you a really long time to get through what is literally just like one page.
Oh, I've seen those before. That's the one place guided view kind of falls flat.
Yeah. And there was a whole sequence that it was beautifully done in the art of two scenes cut together. And you can imagine this in a cinematic fashion of like the bands on stage playing their show so hard, but it's at the same time the camera is showing you the fight that happened afterwards, so it's cutting back and forth between them. And the way they represented that was in this different color palette. But because they isolated the panels in guided view and didn't ever show me the full page the first, I'm just jumping back and forth like, what is the continuity here? Like, here's I think that's Dazzler. I almost said Dazzler. Here's Black Canary singing, and then here, like the next panel, she's punching a person, and you're going, wait, what is going on? And it wasn't until I thought, oh wait, this is guided view messing me up, and I tapped out that I realized, like, oh yeah, this looks gorgeous. Like between the color and largely no dialogue in those scenes, but just like a real missed opportunity, I think. And I do think like they're not exactly extras, but there are some cool little cutscenes which are like cutouts of a local Burnside zine that's following the band around and writing about them. And there's a couple like maybe not laugh out loud funny jokes, but funny humor in that. At one point you see the credits of the zine and it's like written by, illustrated by, photography by, and it's all the same person because of course it's like just a handmade zine, that one person's put out, but put her name like on every credit. And I think in a paperback, especially if you love Annie Wu's art, I think that would be so much more effective to see all those little extras sort of slipped in between the issues and really feel it and be able to see the whole page all at once. But, as it was, like I said, as we started out this episode, this is a book worth having on your digital shelf for a short period of time. And if you like it, go buy the paperback. But
I always say that if you like it, definitely go buy the paperback. Like that's because we covered it in our episode where we talk about digital versus physical and many other episodes here and there too. But at the end of the day, this is sort of art collecting at a high level. And so having having the paperback or having the hardcover if you really like it. If they made one, if it's drawn quarterly, obviously you just go directly to the
think about it. Yeah.
I mean, have you ever read a drawn and quarterly book digitally? I don't even know. Don't even want to know what that feels like.
I don't even know if they make them. I don't want to know. I'm sure they do, but yeah, I just those are the sticking points for me. Was a bad transfer digitally, in my opinion, and because of the Black Canary universe that it's inhabiting, it's not able to fully develop into a Stranger Things Image comic sort of, because it's got all this like sci-fi and the hint of time travel and some sort of alien presence and conspiracy theories with the government, and like Amanda Waller, who that's the person that put together the Suicide Squad in the movie, I believe. And she makes an appearance. And so there's all this sort of like, all those elements are there, but it's so glossed over for this, because it's trying to stay in the world of DC. And
does this feel like a book that is the result of a post Paper Girls universe where DC's like, let's do that, and then they just didn't know who? They're like, well, Black Canary, and they didn't quite.
There's definitely like a crossover with Paper Girls, but I think they were likely being created concurrently. Okay. Or this actually preceded that, because it doesn't ever go totally that far, and if it did go that far, you would wonder even more, like, why is Black Canary involved? Like, what a weird,
no, I'm not even saying like that they're hooked, that they're related. I'm just saying, like, does this feel like it was written because that book is so popular, and that they're like, oh, let's, we're trying to make our characters more relevant.
I think the timing's wrong for that. I mean, it was in my mind too that they were, related, but I think publication date wise, because this was written mostly in 2015, so I don't think it was.
I always thought Paper Girls was older than that. Wow. All right.
Well, I mean, I think it started around 14 or 15, but the other thing is that it's so, and maybe this is just me, but it's like, it's so hard sometimes to accurately portray a profession. And I would say that driving around in a van to play shows in small clubs is like barely even a profession, if you're like, and I mean, I don't mean that as a diss. I just mean it as like, the way music is portrayed in this, there's like a booking agent that's on the road with them, and he's making sure they get paid. And I was like, get paid? What? What sort of high rolling band is this?
Well, just bringing the booking agent on the road with you. I mean, it's
what tiny band can do that? And it's definitely not. It just sort of, it suffers a little bit from those things, I guess. So that's where I'll leave it. Like I definitely think, especially if you're a Comixology Unlimited person, download it, take a look at this art, because I love the art, and I have previously loved what Brendan Fletcher has done with these little universes, and his contributions to DC. So I think it's worth your experiment into it, or whatever, worth a try.
Very good. Well, in addition to that book, where can folks find us, Todd?
I'm so glad you asked. We are everywhere as panelism.inc, and especially on Instagram, we are panelism.inc, and that is the best place to interact with us and see art from the books that we pick and just chat about comics. But you can also find us anywhere podcasts are downloaded and subscribed to, whatever your favorite podcast app is. We are there. Except Spotify, but we'll get there
soon.
Yeah, we hope you will subscribe and share with your friends. And if you are not already, please check out our Game of Thrones podcast, which is called Wednesday in Westeros, although it does come out on Mondays for this final season. We are getting it out as soon as possible. And it is myself, Taylor, and our friend Emily Kelly Cunin. And we recap every episode and just chit chat about Game of Thrones every week.
It's super fun. Getting close to the end on that one. But yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back next week with our Endgame.
Oh, actually, this episode will come out after the Endgame.
Oh, it will. Well, you've already heard our episode about Endgame.
Go back and check out our episode on Endgame.
I hope there's time travel involved so that this episode makes sense, because it means that we're talking to you in the past.
Yeah. Oh man, remember when Captain America lived?
Oh, you mean 11 from like Stranger Things?